we call this unit the metric system. And we've talked yesterday, and we'll talk a little more today, about the metric system, the units used, converted to units. But most of this unit is about how we measure objects in science. We start off by talking about how we measure the length of an object. Then we move into calculating area of an object. From there, we move into calculating and measuring the volume of an object. After that, we work on measuring the mass of an object. And then finally, we wrap all that up and bring it all together by calculating the density of an object. So we'll learn how to do all of those different things. We'll get practice using the various tools to measure length, volume, mass, so forth. So we'll start here talking about length in area. So I know I would call this something different, but I know you guys have a word for this shape from math class, I guess. What do you guys call it?
Rectangular prism.
Rectangular prism. I always call it a rectangular solid, but it doesn't matter. So when we are measuring a rectangular prism, there's sort of 3 dimensions to it. We call them length, width, and height. Okay. There's not really, you guys did this before when in elementary school? Let me ask you a question then. If we're looking at that shape, where's the length? What would you measure if you were measuring the length of that rectangular prism? Joey?
Like, it's always going back.
This?
Yeah.
You would call that length?
No.
Some people are saying no. Arpan, what do you call length?
I call length the front line, like the one to the left.
This? Like left to right, horizontally?
That's
What do you say, Jaden?
same thing.
Same thing? Did you define length?
I say, like the side square going up. I say that's length, and then the width is the one
Okay.
in front there.
That's height.
So here's the issue, is that it doesn't really matter. Okay? Because, well, sometimes people say length is the longest side of an object, and they measure the longest dimension as the length. It doesn't really matter, because like if this book is about that same shape, and maybe you're saying this is the length, okay? Well, what if you turn it this way? Is this the length now? Or is it still this?
I think it's still that.
So, I mean, it doesn't really matter, because eventually what you're going to do with these length measurements is calculate volume, in which you multiply them together, and the order is unimportant. So let's say, and for our purposes, let's call the length this longest dimension of the object. Okay. You could just maybe draw a line from length down to that side.
Are we gonna write anything in a length
No.
box?
Then we could call this the width, this sort of dimension going back into the screen. Okay. And then the height, the sort of vertical dimension. I mean, this line really should point to this. I don't like where that line is. It should point to that dot. But again, it's not really that important, which is which. You're never going to lose points because you measure length and then call it width. When we are working with circular objects, we also have some other measurements and calculations. What's diameter? Do you guys have a definition from math of what diameter is? Fair?
Like say you draw a circle like this,
Yes.
half of it, you draw this line.
Like from here to here?
Yeah, like so, like in the middle.
Yes. Has to pass through the center of a circle. The length of a circle through its midpoint is the diameter. It has to go through the exact center of the circle. What's radius? Arpan?
It's the diameter, but half of it.
It's half of the diameter. It's the distance from the center of the circle out to the edge of the circle. And diameter is twice the radius. radius is half the diameter.
So Mr. Duros,
Yes.
so the first three up top we're not writing anything for, and then the bottom two we are. Does that say on the bottom for the radius half the diameter?
Yes. All right, so let's talk about some of the units. When measuring length, what do you use as a base unit? A base unit for length. Bella? Meters. Then by adding prefixes, we can have other units, millimeter, centimeter, kilometer. Those are the main ones we'll use. Don't generally use deci, deca, hepta. Each unit has an abbreviation we use. What's the abbreviation we use for millimeters? Camel?
MM.
Yep, 2 lowercase m's. How big is a millimeter? Like, if you were to like conceptualize, what is a millimeter? Joe?
1,000
Yeah, that's true, but like, if you're trying to like imagine how big it is, like compare it to like an object we're familiar with. Is it like the width of a human hair?
No, it's a little
No,
bigger.
it's bigger than that. Maybe if you have a regular pencil, the sharpened tip of your pencil, it's probably close to 1 millimeter. It's a 16th of an inch. If you look at a metric unit, metric ruler, the smallest lines are millimeters. Okay, centimeters. What's the abbreviation we use for centimeters? Joey, front of the room?
CM.
CM. How big is a centimeter? Centimeter.
Like a little bigger than a millimeter.
Well, I'd say it's 10 times bigger, so quite a bit bigger. If you were to imagine like your pencil, probably the width of your pencil is really close to a centimeter. Okay? It's about a half of an inch, if you're familiar with what an inch is. Then we have the meter, which we already said is our base unit, so it just has a single letter abbreviation, kind of. How big is a meter? You know?
It's like about the size of a yard.
Yeah, it's real close to a yard. A meter is a little bit bigger, but about a yard. Like the front of your desk, I bet is probably close to a meter. Not the side you always run into, but the front side. Yeah, it's a little shorter than a meter. This is a meter. And finally, kilometer. What abbreviation do we use? Logan? KM? More than a mile, less than a mile. Camel?
I think it's more than a mile. Oh, no, I think it's less than a mile.
How much less?
About more than a quarter lap. Well, like, no, a quarter lap.
So, anybody
3/4 of a mile.
run, not quite, but you're getting closer. Anybody run the Boilermaker? Like the full 15? What do they call it? It's a what?
15K.
A 15K race, 15 kilometer race. How many miles is a Boilermaker? 9.3 miles. So a kilometer is smaller than a mile. It's about 0.6 of a mile. Now, as we measure objects, if it's really small object, less than a centimeter, we'll measure it in millimeters usually. But once it's larger than a centimeter, we start using centimeters until it reaches a meter. And then we start using meters as our unit. And we keep using meters until we get 1,000, and then we start to use what?
Kilometers.
Kilometers. I mean, you could use any unit you want. You know, it's not a rule, but it's just generally what we use. So, last thing, you're going to be measuring a lot of objects over the next couple weeks. So it's important that you measure correctly. It may sound something like, oh, you got to tell me how to measure something. Kind of do sometimes. If we look at this ruler here, so there's a few things to note. Many rulers that we use will have both metric units and customary units on the same ruler. Metric on one side, customary on the other. Inches and centimeters. That's the first thing to know. Second thing to know. It varies by ruler. There's words or symbols. This says centimeters. Does that mean these tiny lines are centimeters? No. It means the numbered lines. 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters. But there are some rulers which will say mm. They are telling you that the smallest lines on the ruler are millimeters. So you have to just sort of be familiar with them. When you're measuring an object, you don't just line up the edge of the ruler with your object to measure. Why not? Sophia?
Because you have to start at the zero.
Yes.
And the end of it more than the zero.
Yes. Sometimes. You have to look at your individual ruler. Some rulers, 0 starts right at the edge of the ruler. Other rulers, such as this one, 0 starts in a little bit. This is nothing. This is the 0 mark. So you have to align your object to measure with the 0 mark. Why do you think they sometimes put them away from the edge? Joey?
So you can actually see the exact spot where it starts.
Yeah, because after a while, if we use these for a long time, they start to wear away, people drop them, they get bent, and then you sort of wear away the end of the ruler, well now it's no longer accurate. Whereas if you can see a distinct 0 line, it's very clear where to align your object. So you align your object to 0, you see how many centimeters it is. This one is more than 1, more than 2, but not quite at the 3 centimeter mark. So it's going to be 2 point something centimeters. And in this case, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2.9 centimeters. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Joey?
When it's like in inches, why is 1 in the middle bigger than?
Yeah, inches, again, this is the benefit of the metric system, right? In centimeters, millimeters, pretty easy, right? You have 10 equals 1 centimeter. So the millimeters just is the decimal point. Not true in inches. Okay? When you look at inches, you have all these various lines. So this is 1 inch. What does this line represent? A half an inch. So this is a half an inch. This is 1.5 inch to here. Then what does this line represent? Quarter inches. What does this line represent? 1/8 of an inches. And these tiny lines? 1/16 of an inch. So like when you're measuring things, like when I'm doing work around my house, I have to measure something to cut. It's like super annoying to work in inches because you're always saying, okay, is that line like the 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch? And just is more difficult than use in a simple system of centimeters and millimeters.
And so 16 different inches on the outside, and then there's 1/8 inch. Why is there another 16?
Where? Here?
Yeah, and then there's another.
So this is, if you, let's say this remote is this big. So it's half an inch, but then it goes to here. What does that mean? It's more than half an inch. But what is it? What number? This is, we don't have to do this. This is why we don't use the English system.
9/16.
How many?
9.
Nope. Because half an inch would be how many sixteenths? 8. Oh yeah, you're right. I was thinking an eighth. Correct, Paul. Yeah, that's 9/16. Super annoying to use, right? Much rather use centimeters and all right. We'll stop there for today. We'll talk about calculating area on Monday.